The sky grumbles for an eternity before pouring down on the frantic earthlings, as if to mock their minuscule existence. The first, most celebrated shower satiates the parched earth, erasing all evidence of soot from the air, bathing the trees and the houses, and making every soul rejoice. As shades of grey hijack the sky, parents make futile attempts to hold their children back from getting drenched. Animals too seem filled with a renewed joy, happily bleating, clucking, and mooing. The calves leap around in elation, escaping their frantic masters and racing all around the village lanes. While bees and dragonflies rule the air, smiles reign over the land. The first shower also means an end to the mile-long walks village women have to embark on in summer to fetch potfuls of water for everyday use from the nearest water source. Farmers groom their equipment, getting ready for another season of hard labor, and hopefully its fruit. The cattle's year-long wait for green crunchy grass finally comes to an end. Bugs and beetles at long last bid farewell to months of estivation, now ready to brave the world. It is time too for children to bid adieu to the fun-filled days when they were the masters of their time. With the vacation now over, school has pushed open its formidable doors once again, pulling them back into a hellish world of harsh rules and incomprehensible books. The reluctant teachers too have managed to overcome their lassitude and drag their feet to the village school, which is now filled with a chattering, if unwilling, crowd. The wedding season has just drawn to a close, and a few houses have added members to their families. The new daughters-in-law are hard at work, slogging day in and day out to win over their still stranger husbands and critical mothers-in-law. The matriarchs, settled all day on moth-eaten cots, watch them with hawk eyes to find any chink in their shy and obedient armors. The husbands seem self-conscious in the presence of their new wives and have temporarily stopped drinking and gambling to impress their unfamiliar spouses. Another activity they have stopped, again temporarily, is working. The leftover rations from the wedding celebration are more than enough for the family, at least for a while. Looking at the landlord's mansion, the first word that escapes any onlooker's mouth is abundant. Stepping inside into a compound almost as large as the village schools, one is taken aback for a moment. Most of it is open field. One boundary wall is lined with cattle sheds with a full mowing herd. The cemented house is two-storied with a brown and green garishly patterned welcome mat at the doorstep. An invite to either walk out richer or lose whatever one takes inside with them. Maybe more. Dusty rubber slippers lie in a disheveled heap on either side of the heavy wooden door, through which hesitant villagers move in a sluggish line, some holding close to their chests the precious metals their daughters-in-law brought with them, some clutching the dog-eared documents of their family's land to give up as mortgage, and some others with their sons in tow to offer as free labor to the god of money, before they are demanded to sacrifice a more prized possession. I swear, Shiva, if I have to come here one more time, which I already know I will, I'm going to lose my mind. How am I going to pay him back? I knew those blue bulls would be the end of me. It will all be fine, brother, don't worry. Yes, I hope so. But tell me, what brings you here? Oh, the usual. I plan to sow cotton this time, and you know how much they charge per packet. High enough to kill you. Never in my life have I known prices this astronomical. And to top it all, the interest Rao Sahib charges is touching the sky.
Kasam se, Sitaram, I don't know how we farmers are supposed to carry on. The government pretends to help, but so right you are. That's all it does, pretend. It's almost moon, but the sun still hasn't risen to its full glory. The night before had seen a sudden downpour, and clouds still shade the sky. A moist breeze blows through the trees. Perched on the branches, birds create quite an uproar, as if holding a parliament to comment on the spectacle taking place below. Catch me if you can! Catch me if you can! A girl's shrill, taunting cry rends the air. Forget it, Palak. I won't be able to, not in 1,000 years. A boy replies with his hands on his knees, panting heavily. Come on, you can do it, Chintu. I know you can. Rehan encourages. Here goes nothing. Palak easily evades him. Her adroit dodging confuses Chintu and he slips, falling headlong into the mud. Palak sits on a boulder nearby and waits for her brother to draw the courage to lift his mud-caked self off the ground. Chintu looks up at her, a lean girl, with her brown hair tied up in the usual tight ponytail. She has an air about herself, he thinks, the way she walks, talks, carries herself. It's like she's an adult already. Chintu, hardly a year and a half younger, has on the other hand managed to paint a different picture of himself in the eyes of his peers. Nobody has ever heard anything uplifting from him, neither about himself nor about anybody else. However, despite being an object of constant ridicule among his mates, he loves to hang out with them. Chintu groans, managing to haul himself out of the mud and wiping the slime off his clothes. See, I told you, it's a sheer waste of time. He leans against a tree, defeated. Yes, okay. Palak dismisses him. Chintu lets out a sigh of relief, which soon turns into a gasp of dread. He sees two boys approaching from a distance. He doesn't mind one of them. He is quite fond of him. Actually, it is the other that scares him out of his wits. Oh, thank God. The promise of a fun afternoon ahead is evident on Rehan's face. There they are, Raghu and Ansh. The two boys are best buddies despite their divergent personalities. Ansh looks timid and introverted, the kind everyone considers harmless, silent, and non-existent company. His friends, however, know better. Once he gets into one of his moods, there's no escaping his true maddening self. But that really happens, so it's nothing they have to worry about. Not too much, anyway. Raghu, with his rebellious and to some daunting nature, is a sharp contrast to Ansh's timid self. He is not intimidating, given the mediocrity of his looks, but his domineering attitude easily makes up for that lacuna. He can resolve fights in the blink of an eye, except when they get interesting. Then he just lets the show go on. Despite this mismatch, Ansh and Raghu get along well. Their friendship is an unusual one, but then some people are meant to be. Raghu has an enormous tattered shirt on, probably a hand-me-down, which dangles just above his knees. The breeze makes his long hair dance. Ansh, as is his wont, wears a clean shirt buttoned all the way up to the neck, tucked neatly into the shorts. His hair is oiled and meticulously parted on one side. Hello humans, and Chintu. Chintu cowers behind the boulder. How are we all today? Over-dramatizing conversations is Raghu's forte. He raises his left eyebrow and thrusts a hand into one of his pockets, pulling out a handful of gleaming sea green marbles and jingling them like coins. Who is up for a game? Come on, Chintu, we are just playing. It's okay. Ansh tries to pull the much heavier boy and fails miserably. Get in here, you big marble, says Raghu as he slaps his thighs and doubles up laughing. God, I'm funny. All through the evening, Chintu is attacked with ruthless comments and names, but the poor boy doesn't dare protest because of his fear of Raghu. He keeps everyone entertained at his own expense until it's time to go home. After an unwilling departure, Palak flings her arm over her brother's shoulder and starts singing, in no particular order, the verses of a song whose name she can never remember. She soon runs out of the lyrics and starts humming instead. So, how's school going? She asked after a long silence. Oh, don't ask. The teacher took a maths test today and everyone seemed to know about it, except me. Why am I not surprised? Palak rolls her eyes. All my classmates were saying that the teacher had announced it day before yesterday, but then how come I didn't know? All of them had certainly ganged up against me. I am sure of it. Well, have you considered the possibility that you weren't paying attention when the teacher told the class? What? Chintu shoves Palak in the shoulder. Are you on my side or theirs? I thought you of all people would support me. All those boys make fun of me and you are the only one I thought I could trust. But I guess I was wrong. Chintu sulks. Okay, little brother, I'm sorry, says Palak, exasperated. Anyway, Chintu continues with renewed passion. When I failed with flying colors, the teacher gave me such a scolding. He hit both my palms so hard with that wooden stick he carries around. I felt like my hands would fall right off. And the worst part is, he made me hold my ears and stand on the desk for the 2 whole classes. He said that I am a good-for-nothing fool and that my brain and body are the same, round and useless. Everybody was laughing. Oh, Palak, it was so humiliating. Palak sees her brother's lower lip wobble as he recalls the incident. But then his expression slowly changes. He looks angry now. I tell you, Palak, if I had my way, I would beat those kids to a pulp. I would just... He punches the air as if his conspirators are standing right in front of him. Good luck with that. Palak giggles. What do you mean? Why are you giggling? Here I am, confiding in you, and all you do is giggle? Chintu looks wounded. Oh no, you get me wrong. Look, we are finally home and I am famished. Palak ducks her head to enter their 2-room house. How many times have I told you to not play with that twisted boy, huh? Palak, what's his name? Raghu. Palak replies morosely. Baba scares her when he's in a bad mood. Children today, they think they are smarter than all of us. Fine then, do as you please. But remember this, Baba continues after a short pause. We have seen more of life than you have, Palak. Chintu, this is for you too. Listen and listen well. I do not approve of that disrespectful, dishonest, discourteous boy. He has bad influence written all over him and I don't want you to turn out to be vagabonds like him one day. He pauses and then with a sigh he says, I tell you all this for your own good. Don't you see, Palak? At least you should try to understand. You are the elder one. Palak bites her lower lip, looking at the ground. I should not see you both playing with him any more. Is that understood? His voice turns harsh. Yes, Baba, the two say in unison. But it seems to Palak that Chintu says it a bit too happily. She makes it a point to chide him later. And as for the matter at hand, Palak thinks it unfair for her father to judge Raghu without really knowing him. She knows all too well that whatever he has just said is based on stories he has heard in the village. Raghu is a close friend of hers and there is no way she will let him go. Her mind is made up, but she knows better than to say it out loud. This isn't the first time Baba has told her this. Anyway, it hasn't worked before and it won't work now. Hurry up with the tea, Kamla, he says. Oh, Raghu, you are back. Yes, Ma. Raghu gives Yashoda a big hug while reaching out to yank his sister's hair. Ow! Kavita pulls away and tries to dig her nails into Raghu's arm, but he is too quick for her. He jumps behind his mother to dodge her claws. Why do you always come back so late, Raghu? If you return even half an hour earlier, you can read a page or two before going to sleep. I will try from next time. Raghu nods gravely, putting on his most earnest look. Ma, this is what I always tell you. Why don't you ever scold him? See, this is what I mean when I say I am the only one you have a problem with. Raghu sticks his tongue out from behind his mother. Raghu? His mother's fake anger makes him snap back to attention. Go and change, she adds without lifting her eyes from the utensils she is washing. Kavita storms out of the house, while Raghu sniggers his way to the makeshift wooden bathroom his father has built out of dried branches of the Arjun tree. A little while later, a visibly tired Shiva steps in through the door, a sulking Kavita in tow. She glares at Raghu, who is now sitting quietly in a corner, trying not to look his father in the eye. Shiva drops his farming tools on one side of the room and sits down heavily on the floor, his eyes closed. Yashoda cooks on the chulha as the family huddles around on the mud floor. The smoke the burning wet wood gives off irritates their eyes and makes Yashoda cough even more. She has recently been diagnosed with tuberculosis, but they are far from mustering up the money to get it treated. The one-room hut is separated into the kitchen and the living area by just an old bedsheet. There is no wall, no door. It is covered by a steep, slanting, dexterously woven straw roof. The gap between the wall and the ceiling provides perfect ventilation, but also an easy entryway for mosquitoes and bugs. The roof threatens to leak in the monsoons, so Shiva covers it with blue plastic sheets on risky days. The kitchen is an unorganized, shabby mess. Tin drums of varying sizes holding grains and pulses, and heaps of firewood line a wall blackened with soot. A voluminous brass pot is mounted on a stand to store drinking water and is distinguished from the others by its golden sheen. Another wall is pierced with hooks and nails to hang clothes on. Axes, spades, and sickles are stacked in a corner. The mattresses, blankets, and bed sheets are folded neatly and piled on one side of the room. They are spread out at night and shared by the whole family to sleep upon. Hear this, Shiva says after a while. He looks flushed, as he often does when he comes back home at the end of the day. Even though home should be a welcoming haven after a day's hard work. Really? Haridas is going to town? Kavita cuts in, forgetting all the injustices against her. Yes. And to sell. And he found a job? What kind of job? Patience, my dear girl. It's not exactly a job. He has opened a small eatery of his own there, a dhaba. So anyway, as I was saying, this is great. Haridas owns a dhaba now. I wish we could go and visit him. It's been so long since we last went to town. Well, there is no need for that. If only you would let me finish, Shiva thunders, losing the little patience had left. Sorry. So I was saying, to celebrate this news, we must go to Kisna sometime soon to offer our wishes. Haridas is visiting the village this very week. Really? Oh, Baba, you made my day. When will we go? Tomorrow night, maybe. I can hardly wait. Raghu beams.